Those mugshots are evidence of the Democratic Party conspiracy run out of the Joe Biden administration in league with Democratic Party allies in New York and in Georgia to rig an election and deprive U.S. citizens of their civil rights under color of law. First up is the current crisis, which is the coordinated conspiratorial attack on our republic by the Democratic Party, Biden operatives, Biden appointees, allied prosecutors in New York and in Fulton County, Georgia. And the latest is, as I talked about earlier this week, the effort to jail almost 20 people in Georgia for exercising their rights under the law to dispute and challenge an election. And this was my kind of a preview of my response to the horrible week earlier this week. I'm wearing my Ford baseball cap, so here we are. Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here. We are in a rule of law crisis with these mass political arrests down there in Georgia. Indeed, President Trump is set to be arrested as well. All of these people, these 19 people, their crime was opposing Biden under state, federal, and constitutional law and daring to dispute an election. There's never been anything like this in American history, and officials in Georgia, the federal courts, state courts can't act soon enough to shut this down. On top of that, we've got this crisis up here in Washington, D.C. with an out-of-control Justice Department abusing Trump while protecting Biden. And it's also going on in New York City with the Soros-backed prosecutor trying to jail Trump again on political charges. Congress can't act soon enough to shut this down, but you can be sure that Judicial Watch is taking this seriously, and we've got multiple investigations under FOIA, lawsuits underway to uncover the truth about this terrible corruption. I like what that guy's saying. I agree with him. It is a crisis. Willis, again, a Democratic Party politician elected as District Attorney of Fulton County, a largely Republican state, controlled generally by Republicans at the state level, has abused her powers as a prosecutor to try to jail President Trump and others for doing something they're allowed to do, and I think we should encourage Americans to do, which is to exercise their freedoms under law to challenge elections if they think the facts and circumstances warrant it. And to suggest that to do so is a crime, is a direct attack on the First Amendment. And we know it's a direct attack on the First Amendment for political purposes because of the political nature of these charges. The targeting of Republicans who challenged an election, while in the state of Georgia specifically, you had the entire left-wing establishment, not only in Georgia, but actually nationally, challenge elections previously, specifically the Georgia elections for governor, where Stacey Abrams has infamously refused to acknowledge that she lost that campaign at least 2 elections ago. And she has a right to do that. I mean, people can mock her for doing that and disagree with her for doing it, but the idea that she would go to jail for holding a different opinion and acting on that opinion is absurd and an abuse. And on top of that, you have the circus of mass arrests of Biden opponents resulting from this prosecution that is about politics and not about the law, forcing these individuals to come down, turn themselves in, put their safety in jeopardy. I don't think the Secret Service should have allowed President Trump to be put in or processed at the Fulton County Jail or wherever he was processed, given how dangerous that situation is down there, but they did. And certainly they didn't need to take his mugshot or require him to post bond or frankly anyone else to post bond. And here his mugshot, you can see he's obviously not happy to be victimized like this. And some other folks who are being maligned through this process. America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who is they want to send to jail for providing legal advice. Next up is Mark Meadows, the Chief of Staff to the President, who they want to send in jail for helping the President do his job as President. Sidney Powell, another lawyer who was challenging elections not only on Trump's behalf, but others throughout the nation. Perfectly legitimate legal cases she was bringing. John Eastman, one of the country's leading constitutional advocates and lawyers, he's being jailed and targeted, by, not only here in Georgia, but elsewhere, for simply being a lawyer. And then Jenna Ellis, who also was a lawyer for President Trump during the election, again, who's being jailed and targeted for being a lawyer. All of these individuals were arrested in an attack on the American way that we've never really seen before. I mean, it's one thing to have an arrest here or there, or to have Trump dragged in and arraigned 3-4 times, as it now has happened, but to have now nearly 24 people jailed for the crime of opposing Biden's election or disputing election is, it's just beyond comprehension in terms of how dangerous it is to the functioning of our government and our system of law under our Constitution. And if a local district attorney can charge individuals engaged in national-wide debates about policy and the outcomes of elections, all bets are off. Any one of you can be jailed if you say the wrong thing, and some prosecutor somewhere decides that you said it and you should have known it was a lie. I was commenting in the office. I said, well, someone goes and says, you should cut taxes because taxes are too high, and some left-wing lunatic prosecutor says, oh no, taxes are too low and you should have known that. You were lying and you were trying to obstruct government or do whatever, and we're going to prosecute you. It challenges your core, I say, God-given right to petition your government under the First Amendment and obviously your free speech rights. Now, Judicial Watch isn't going to be cowed and intimidated by this lawlessness down in Georgia. What we should do as citizens is use the tools entrusted to us under law and under the Constitution to expose and stop this abuse of power. And I've gone over some of those possibilities and how that could be done before, and I'll repeat it shortly. But you know what Judicial Watch does mostly, or we're well known for, is filing open records law requests under open records laws at the state and federal level. Obviously, the federal law is called FOIA. I don't know what it's called in Georgia. Anyway, Georgia has an open record statute as well. So we filed as soon, let's put it this way, Willis, when she announced the indictment of Trump, she was asked directly if she had been coordinating or colluding with the Biden Justice Department and Jack Smith, the Biden Justice Department appointee, who is acting as a cutout for the political operatives in the Justice Department trying to jail Trump to help Biden win election again. And she declined to say one way or another whether she was. And obviously, when that happens, Judicial Watch's ears prick up, saying, well, what is she hiding? Why doesn't she want to say it? So we asked for records about any collusion and cooperation and conspiracy with the Biden Justice Department about this unprecedented and malicious case being brought against President Trump. And as of today, they haven't given us any records. And I tell you, if they don't give us any records, we will pursue relief in court, or at least that's what the plan is. So we're not going to back away. We're not going to back down. And this was my reaction last night to the outrageous circus and terrible time for America that we went through yesterday with the arrest of Trump. Well, it's a terrible day for America. President Trump has been arrested for the 4th time. This time by a Democratic prosecutor who was out of control in trying to jail him for doing literally nothing wrong, which is disputing an election, which is his God-given right as a president, a citizen, and a candidate. And Judicial Watch is not going to stand idly by at this unprecedented attack on our elections and our republic. We have pending requests with the Fulton County, Georgia prosecutors for documents on what looks to be their collusion and conspiracy with the Biden administration up here in Washington, D.C. And I tell you, if we don't get the documents, we plan to go to court to try to get them. So pray for America, pray for Donald Trump, but you can be sure that Judicial Watch will seek to uphold the rule of law against this latest attack. Yeah, and I think that's something everyone needs to do, not just Judicial Watch. Don't you agree? And on top of everything else, we have this political abuse of Trump, which is obvious election interference. I think the election's officially been rigged and compromised as a result of this, these leftists putting their thumb on the scales against President Trump. And obviously, it's also designed, because it's two sides of the same coin. You attack the opponent while protecting the incumbent, in this case Biden, and you have this significant evidence of criminality by Joe Biden. And I was on Fox Business with Charles Payne the other day, and we were talking about RICO, right? And there's this, the absurdity of a RICO charge against Trump for what, conspiring to uphold his rights under law, under the Constitution and the various amendments to the Constitution and federal and state law. I mean, to kind of say that's a RICO charge or that's a racketeering operation is to highlight its absurdity. But what is a racketeering operation? It's, for instance, a president or a vice president or a senator using his son, his brother, his grandchildren, other family members to launder money into the family enterprise, right? Which is to line their pockets with the cash from foreign governments, foreign fronts, such as in China and Russia, in exchange for favors, and also in addition to taking these bribes, extorting money, as has been alleged by the Burisma CEO in an FBI document. The extortion, of course, run by Joe and Hunter Biden. That's RICO, right? It's RICO Joe, it's not RICO Trump, it's RICO Joe. So the use of racketeering against Trump on such specious, obviously absurd grounds further highlights the fact that the Justice Department has purposely and dastardly over the last 5 years protected Biden from charges that arguably should have been brought under the federal RICO and racketeering laws. And so what next? Well, I can tell you immediately what's going to happen next. I guess there are two big hearings next week. In Georgia, the case is, or the question is whether the case will be removed to federal court. Now, the theory of law here is, and I'm not a lawyer, so forgive me if I give you a layman's understanding of it. So, you know, you can always look it up yourself or get some other opinions on it. But, you know, generally speaking, federal officials, if they're charged in criminal or civil cases for over activities they did as a federal official, I mean, A, they potentially have immunity, but secondly, the issue has to be resolved at the federal courts. So Mark Meadows has asked, and I think another defendant has asked that the case be removed to federal court because obviously he's a federal official. He was the president's chief of staff. Another federal official in the Justice Department has also been charged, Jeff Clark, for doing his job as a Justice Department attorney by asking questions about voter fraud, and of course President Trump himself. And so if that case is removed, it means that it won't be before the state court judge there, and there'll be issues about whether the case is thrown out against the federal officials, and that will be resolved at the federal level. And if they aren't, then the trial will proceed in federal court, which might be a more favorable forum than Fulton County, Georgia, which is 95% Democrat. I don't know literally if it's 95% Democrat, but the concern generally is that these left-wing prosecutors, these Democratic prosecutors in Washington, D.C. and New York and Fulton County are bringing these specious cases against Trump with the idea that the jury isn't going to care because they all are, it's going to be filled, their juries are going to be filled with Trump haters. And so the rule of law won't matter. It will be just vengeance and vindictiveness. And we kind of see that vindictiveness with requiring Trump to get a photo. I mean, I think one of the reasons he was so unhappy in that photo, and I know Trump supporters, and I'm sure the Trump campaign is going to try to make the best of this photo, this mugshot, but it's evidence of a crime, right? The crime is a corrupt conspiracy against that man you see on the screen and people around him. A corrupt conspiracy based on politics to use the laws, to use the office of the Justice Department or district attorney's offices in New York and New Jersey to jail people not because they committed crimes, but because they are on the wrong side of the political aisle and because of their politics and policies. So as far as I'm concerned, those mugshots are evidence of crimes. But for the left, they're going to celebrate the mugshot, right? And partisans in campaigns are probably going to want to use this mugshot. Maybe even Republicans running against Trump will want to use this mugshot against him. So in the long run, I know there are many who suggest and analyze these indictments as helping Trump, and that may be true in the short term, in the sense that it may solidify his bid to be the nominee in this primary fight. But on the other hand, I don't think you want to be indicted if you're running for office. You don't want to face, and I do think it's a much more significant likelihood than many would like to admit, that Trump goes to jail as soon as next year. I mean, they're setting him up to go to jail, and the only question is, are they going to figure out a way to do it in one of these 4 jurisdictions to get him in prison? And obviously, it's going to be tougher to run for president if you're in jail. So I mean, this is such a wild interference in I think we have a right to pick our election without corrupt public government officials trying to rig the game by indicting for no reason candidates. And in this case, Joe Biden's people are doing it, or their Democratic Party allies. So those mugshots are evidence of the Democratic Party conspiracy run out of the Joe Biden administration in league with Democratic Party allies in New York and in Georgia to rig an election and deprive U.S. citizens of their civil rights under color of law. See, those are the kinds of charges that that Biden's throwing at Trump. It actually applies to the Biden administration and arguably these 2 district attorneys, Alvin Bragg in New York and Ms. Willis down in Georgia. So, so what's coming up? So that argument about the federal removal question, there's going to be a hearing next week on it. I don't know if they may have witnesses. I guess Willis's people want to bring in witnesses to the federal court. So we'll see what happens there, the federal judge does. My guess is they'll remove the case. And the big question is, will the case be removed in its entirety? Meaning, will all the defendants, basically have their case moved upstairs to federal court? And I don't know. I think there's some discretion by the judge to do that. So it'll be interesting to see that. And the other big question, as we talked about last week, is when is the trial in D.C. going to proceed? Now, the trial in Miami over their sham documents case is set for when? I think it's April of 2024. So anyway, first few months of the year next year. The government in D.C., the Biden gang, is seeking to try Trump on their sham charges related to disputing an election in January, I think January 2nd, with the jury selection to begin in December, and it's absurd. And Trump's team is seeking a April, I think, 2026 start date. So Judge Chutkan is going to have her hearing next week as well, I think on Monday, the same day. So we'll see what she decides to do. I suspect that Judge Chutkan is no fan of President Trump. Her conduct on the bench has suggested that. She's basically admitted it. And so I just hope she's able to judge this case fairly. It doesn't mean she won't be able to, but I'm a little bit skeptical, to put it mildly. and gives him a fair shot to defend himself, and resist. And the invitation of the Justice Department under Joe Biden to intervene in the election by holding a trial in the middle of a primary campaign. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.